We are talking The Invitation, specifically the unrated cut. And this one is directed by Jessica M. Thompson, who has previously done mostly kind of TV before. She has directed one feature and worked in other features as kind of other roles. But this one stars Nathalie Emmanuel, who I think most people will know from her role in Game of Thrones, where she played Missandei, but she has been in one or two of the kind of the Fast and Furious movies. Now, as I mentioned, this side I have watched the unrated cut. Now, I haven't seen the theatrical cut. I've only seen this version. So I can't give you an exact kind of comparison in regards to the differences. But this is not a director's cut. This is just a few scenes that have been extended as far as I could be left from. But I did a bit of research, and there appears to be about 2 minutes of extra footage, which is mostly extended scenes of kind of like a little bit more gore, a little bit more blood. And there is a sex scene in the movie, which I think has the most added to it. So it's a little bit longer sex scene. But it comes down to a few seconds here, a few seconds there, adding up to around 2 minutes in total. So not a huge difference, I don't think, to the theatrical cut. But obviously this one slightly more adult than the kind of the previous version. Now, what is this movie about? If you've seen my review for another movie recently called House of Darkness, it's very similar, strangely, and the kind of the twist, so to speak, is kind of the same sort of thing. But what is the story? I'll tell you. So Evie is a character played by Nathalie Emmanuel, and she is this young woman in America, in New York, who is somewhat put upon. Her rent is past due, she has no family, she's got no kind of like love life, that kind of thing. She's kind of a little bit kind of bitter about her kind of lot in life. And she decides that she's going to do this DNA test, one of these kind of things that you have nowadays, you know, to trace ancestors and things like this. But she discovers to her surprise that she has actually got some relatives that are in England that come from a kind of wealthy, old money kind of family. And they're quite keen to meet her and want her to come to this wedding where one of their family members is going to be wed to another wealthy elite family, and she's been invited to come to the wedding for that and obviously to meet her kind of family. So she's a little bit reluctant at first, but she agrees and meets her family, of which are kind of stereotypical stuffy upper crust, you know, white British men. But she does meet this handsome guy from this other family who is the kind of a charming, good looking, everything like that. Seems to be everyone kind of somewhat kisses his ass, and she's quite taken with him. But there may well be a dark secret that he's hiding. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss what I think works. Okay. Now, this is a kind of supernatural romantic horror movie. If you have watched TV shows like Vampire Diaries or movies like Twilight, it's maybe not quite as sappy as that, but it's kind of along those lines. I have a friend of mine who is an author that writes kind of romantic supernatural fiction, and this is all of this kind of stuff basically. Lots of kind of like you know, mystery guys in kind of swirling winds and stuff like this, and epic romances. It's very much like these kind of like airport novels, is the best way I would describe it. So if you like that kind of thing, then this is going to be a movie for you. But is there anything else for other viewers here? What do I think works? Okay, this does have somewhat of a Gothic kind of feel to it. We have this kind of these sets within that take place in England, and these locations, these kind of Gothic kind of mansions with lots of kind of like statues and kind of interesting architecture and things like this, and very kind of like old-fashioned kind of like butlers and maids and things like this. So it does have this kind of almost Hammer-esque kind of style feel to it, because it's playing like these kind of old-fashioned kind of style, you know, upper crust kind of style families that we're so used to seeing in historical dramas here in the UK. So it does have that sort of that kind of sort of Gothic feel to it. And the movie, I think, wisely kind of teases us through as the film goes on about what's kind of going on. I mean, it's fairly obvious. You've only got the first scene in the movie, I think, is a little bit of too much of a giveaway. I won't spoil it for you, but it's fairly obvious right from the kind of the prologue about what's actually kind of going on. But then we have like characters and place names like Carfax Abbey, and we have characters called Lucy and Mina and Jonathan. I'm not going to spell it out for you, but you should be able to guess where I'm going with that. So, you know, it's relatively obvious about what the kind of the idea here is, but the actual overt showing of it is somewhat kind of like peppered through the movie, and we kind of get this kind of build up. And I do think it does a pretty decent job here of creating somewhat of a kind of a spooky atmosphere, even though you do feel it's, to, you know, not to excuse the pun, a little bit toothless in some ways. I do think it has like this kind of fun kind of like Gothic kind of vibe to it, with these it does kind of lean into kind of classic horror, particularly I would say. And I actually kind of quite like some of our characters here. I thought the character of Evie, played by Nathalie Emmanuel, was quite a likeable kind of character, and I think she kind of strikes the right balance between being kind of a modern kind of New Yorker mixing with people who who are from a very different world, without kind of seeming too condescending, but just there is a little bit of like commentary about stuffy white men, you might say, but I think it doesn't go overboard with it. I don't think, at least, anyway. But there is a degree of it. But I also like some of the other characters. We have these kind of two sort of female bridesmaids, which I think are quite fun, and I really kind of enjoyed their scenes. Actually, I thought they were particularly vampy, if in one way. I thought they were very good. But some of the other characters as well. You've got Sean Pertwee in here as a kind of the rigid kind of butler, and of course our host, our hunky kind of like male lead here, who the character of Evie becomes somewhat infatuated with. Again, he's kind of played with a mix of kind of charm but kind of threat, which I thought was all pretty good. I actually kind of quite liked some of the effects here. They do err on a little bit of CGI at times, but for a lot of it, I thought they worked pretty well. There's a really fabulous scene, I think, that takes place in this kind of wine cellar with a couple of the maids. I thought that was kind of pretty good. So there are a couple of scenes here which I thought did work pretty well. And I actually kind of quite liked, even though the story is somewhat obvious and somewhat, clearly where it's going, there are some aspects of the story where I was quite intrigued by, because I wanted to see where it went. Like the kind of these family members that Evie has kind of found. I mean, how do they actually kind of feel about what is her relationship going to be with them? Now, that's actually not part of the main plot, to be honest with you. That's just a means to an end to get the character of Evie to this kind of place. It doesn't actually, she doesn't actually feature that much to do with them, to be honest. But I actually found the prospect of her relationship with them quite interesting, and maybe I would have liked to have a bit more interaction with them, but it kept me thinking, that I can't. It's not as obvious about where that might go compared to maybe how her relationship with this other family is going to end up, for example. So there were elements here that were kept me quite engaged. I thought for the most part the acting was all kind of fine. I thought the direction here was kind of okay. I think it does feel a little bit like a TV show. But I thought the direction was solid, but if not spectacular, and it made for a somewhat watchable melodramatic kind of horror movie. So if you like a bit of melodrama, if you like sultry affairs and things like this, and relationship drama and love stories and this kind of thing, but with a kind of but you feel like you're a bit of a goth or whatever, then you may want to check it out. What doesn't work, this is such an obvious kind of story outside of a few kind of like minor kind of story beats that I think sometimes left even kind of unfinished. But the bulk of the kind of the main story, I think, is very obvious about where it's kind of going. Like I said, the kind of the main threat, if you like, I think the movie thinks it's kind of being clever and hiding the fact about what it actually is, but it's so obvious, literally from the kind of the first scene. And then from there, it is a lot of cliches. This, I feel, was the biggest issue with this movie. It really leans into these cliches, both from the character of Evie, Nathalie's Emmanuel's character. You know, she's the plucky down on her luck girl, for example, and we see past due on the fridge and things like this, and she's got this, you know, the one kind of sassy friend. So she's got plenty of kind of cliches. Then we kind of meet our characters of the English characters, and again, they're all kind of like typical kind of like high society stereotypes, things like this. And again, there's a little bit of kind of like a few swipes here and there on the patriarchy and stuff. So those of you where that kind of stuff will just annoy you, I think it will annoy you in this movie. Like I said, I don't think it goes overboard on that, but it is there. And even kind of certain sequences. For example, there's a sequence where Evie's kind of like, you know, walking in front of this exploding flames and things like that, walking towards the camera. All the kind of the cheesy shots are there. And I gotta have to say, I think that's because our director, relatively kind of an experience in regards to features and to just hitting all those familiar notes. So this movie is somewhat obvious in regards to its kind of its plot, and also very kind of cliched in its kind of direction and kind of breakdown of sequences and kind of what happens. That doesn't mean to say you can't enjoy it, but you never really feel like you are, you know, you're experiencing anything particularly kind of fresh. Now, as I've mentioned, that there are some things here that I wish were more expanded upon. I actually was quite interested in her relationship, especially when things are revealed. Her relationship to her actual kind of, and they are her family. I was kind of half expecting them to be like, we're not really her family, it was just a kind of like a ruse to get you here. But they are. And therefore I was like, okay, well that's interesting, because now I'm kind of curious as to what her relationship is going to be to her genuine kind of bloodline. But it doesn't really go much into that. I mean, they're kind of somewhat forgotten about once we kind of get into the kind of the main story. And I then have to, without kind of spoiling, like, I have to talk about the ending. The ending does feel a little rushed. There's kind of like an epilogue, which to me I would have done without completely. I didn't think that really made a lot of sense. But prior to that, with the conclusion to the actual story main, feels kind of a little bit kind of rushed. And there's a character turn in that section of the movie that I would have liked to have seen explored, but it's kind of just washed away. And the ultimate kind of like conclusion to that, it just kind of like ends. And I was like, that kind of feels like the ending here was, we're on a kind of a bit of a schedule, and we kind of need to get this kind of wrapped up. So I do feel this is an interesting and enjoyable movie to those of you who aren't particularly kind of demanding, who don't require new ideas, who don't really mind that this isn't a particularly kind of fresh movie. It's a serviceably made movie, I think, with some interesting kind of Gothic elements to it. But, you know, and I was engaged within the story and the characters. So I will give this an above average 6 out of 10, but I don't think it's anything too special. But it's certainly worth a look if you kind of, certainly you're into the kind of the more melodramatic kind of style, kind of romantic kind of style of horror films. You know, those of you who love to pick up trashy romance novels in the kind of the airport, but you know, you get your, oh, he's really an angel, he's really a vampire, he's all this, that and the other. Yeah, check this one out. 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.